Good morning, students. Students, we will start with second chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. In this chapter, we will discuss the structure of flower and then the male reproductive unit of a flower. Reproduction. We know reproduction is that particular process which is essential for the continuity of the species generation after generation. In case of flowering plants, sexual reproduction occurs, and the first reproductive organ meant for sexual reproduction formed is flower. So flower is a modified stem which functions as a reproductive organ in higher plants. Let us discuss about the structure of flower. Most of the flowers, they have four main whorls, that is sepal, petal, stamen and carpel. Out of these four whorls, sepals and petals are the non-essential parts as they do not directly participate in sexual reproduction. Stamens and carpels, they are the essential part. Stamens are the male part of a flower, whereas carpels, they are the female part of a flower. Most of the flowers are hermaphrodite, or you can say bisexual, where they contain both male and female parts. Hermaphrodite, this is the term used in case of animals mainly. In case of plants, the term used is bisexual when both the male and the female sex organs are present within the same flower. Others may contain one of the two parts, either male or female, and they are called unisexual flowers. Students, see the structure of common flower. In a typical flower, a small stalk or pedicel is present. On the pedicel, receptacle is there. Receptacle bears all the four parts of a flower: sepal, petal, stamen, and pistil or carpel. Sepal and petal are the non-essential part, as I have discussed earlier, whereas stamen is the male part of a flower and pistil is the female part of a flower. About the four different whorls of a flower: sepal, small leaf-like structures growing at the base of the petal. It is the outermost whorl. Sepals are also known as calyx. The main function of calyx is to protect the flower in the bud stage. When the flower is very small, is in the bud stage, the outermost green colored leaf-like part, that is sepal or calyx, help in the protection of a flower. Petals. This layer lies just above the sepal layer. Petals, also known as corolla, they are usually bright in color and their main function is to attract insects for pollination. Stamens or androecium. These are the male parts of a flower, help to produce male gametes. Pistil, female part of a flower. It is also called gynoecium. Stamens. Stamens are basically consists of two parts. Long cylinder stalk-like part is filament which attaches the anther to the flower. Then on the head of the stamen, anther is present. Anther is the region where pollen grains are produced. Anther is bilobed, consisting of four microsporogenesis, two microsporogia in each lobe of the anther. The female part is still. It consists of three parts. The uppermost tip is the stigma. Stigma, style, and ovary. Stigma is the tip of the style. Stigma used to catch pollen grains from different pollinators. The long cylinder stalk that holds the stigma, that is known as style. Style is a hollow tube through which the pollen tube moves to the ovaries to cause fertilization. The lower basal part of the pistil is ovary. Ovary contains ovules. Next is about the male reproductive unit, that is anther. A very young anther consists of two lobes of actively dividing meristematic cells. Meristematic cells, those cells which are capable of division. They are surrounded by a layer of epidermis. Each anther lobe develops two pollen sacs. So, a two-lobed anther develops four pollen sacs that are situated at the four corners of the anther. Then is the microsporogeum. Microsporogeum or pollen sacs. They have four outer wall layers, that is epidermis, endothecium, middle layer, and tapetum. The outermost wall layer is epidermis. Just below the epidermis, endothecium is there. On the inner side of the endothecium, 2 to 3 layer thick middle layers are present. Tapetum, innermost layer which provide nourishment to the developing pollen grains. In addition to these wall layers, there is the sporogenous tissue which forms the microspores or pollen grains. Let's see the structure of anther, internal structure. Anther, which is a bilobed structure. The outer four wall layers, that is epidermis, endothecium, middle layer and tapetum. Inside the tapetum, sporogenous cells are present. These sporogenous cells then undergo reduction division to form pollen grains or microspores. In the mature anther, the diagram, we are able to see the pollen grains. Pollen grains, mature pollen grains, after the maturation of the pollen grains, the wall of anther breaks down and help in the release of pollen grains from anther. So this is known as dehiscence of anther. Then is the microsporogenesis. This is the process of formation of microspores. Microspores, also known as pollen grains. These microspores are formed from the microspore mother cell through reduction division meiosis. And this process is known as microsporogenesis. Cells of the sporogenous tissue in the pollen sacs undergo meiosis to form 4 haploid pollen grains, also known as pollen tetrad. The pollen grain represents the male gametophyte. Male gametophytic structure, that is pollen grains, they are formed inside the anther by the process of microsporogenesis.